Over the last decade, the MVP award in the NFL has gone to a quarterback 9 times. With names like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Peyton Manning, this award has turned into an automatic pick for the best quarterback of that year. It didn't used to be like this though. If you look back to the years prior to this past decade, there was an almost even split between a quarterback and a non-quarterback winning. At this point in the 2018 season, it seems like there's a serious debate for another non-quarterback to win it. Right now, Todd Gurley is seen as a consensus top 3 pick based on his stats. Looking at his numbers, it makes sense on the surface. He's leading the NFL in rushing yards, he has the highest total touchdowns, and he's a top 10 receiving weapon of the backfield. While it's undeniable that Gurley's having a great year, it is my opinion that he should not be the MVP. Before we get to my main reasons though, let's go over Gurley's skill set and discuss how the Rams use him in their offense. After all, this video is still a film room piece on this channel. I want you to understand their scheme before we discuss him as a running back. After tracking all 198 carries this season, the Rams primarily run a zone blocking scheme. They run outside zone on 61% of his snaps, and they also run a good amount of inside zone and gap plays like duo a healthy percent of the time. Schematically, the basic principle of the scheme is to stretch the defense horizontally in order to create a cutback lane for the running back. After creating flow with the linebackers, they then use play action in order to create bigger plays down the field. This offense is incredibly effective, and Gurley plays a valuable part. He's a very good zone running back, and he consistently makes the correct read on his runs. He bullies for more yards, and if he's given a crease, he can break a bigger run if there's space. Now, if there's one thing to say about him, it's that he's a very fluid athlete in the way he moves. He has good footwork and vision to see holes, and then he pairs that with patience and burst to exploit them. In this offense though, Gurley is asked to be more than just a runner. While he's their main tailback on first and second downs, they also love using his receiving abilities in space. They use him near the line of scrimmage on screens, but he also has deep speed and route running ability in order to beat linebackers as well. This run against the Raiders shows all these traits. The Rams ran outside zone to the right. After taking the snap, Gurley started to press towards the outside. Now, some coaches teach their running backs to aim for the butt of the tight end, while others teach the running back to aim for a point 1 yard behind the offensive tackle. Either way, it results in the same thing. The running back is put on a path to the edge, and his goal is to push as far as he can before cutting back inside. On this play, Gurley read the strong side D gap all the way back to the backside A gap. He's patiently looking for a crease to make his cut. Using his excellent vision, he saw that the backside guard was making a great reach block on the nose tackle, so that's where he took his path. Gurley hop-stepped through this gap and then used his left hand to stiff arm a diving defender. This allowed him to shed this tackle and burst forward for a 15-yard gain on this play. This is what Gurley's good at. He made the correct read and he churned more yards for this offense. In this zone blocking scheme, this is very important for Sean McVay as a play caller, and it helps his offense remain on schedule. Here's another example of their outside zone running game. This time, the offense used a jet sweep motion from their wide receiver and then followed with a sift block by their tight end. These motions and actions were done in order to create room for the running back. According to my tracking, the Rams use a sift, a jet sweep, or both on 39% of Gurley's outside zone runs. The one thing that I really want you to pay attention to is how these motions and disguises affect the linebackers. After the snap, watch the will linebacker closely. Because of the disguises that occur on this play, he's 100% caught out of position. This makes him late to come down and help in run support. Then, when you factor in the sheer movement the Rams offensive line created, this is an easy running lane for Gurley. He doesn't even get touched until 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. On this play, Gurley did a pretty good job of slipping the downfield tackles, but again, you can't ignore the wide open running lane that this scheme created. This offense does this so frequently that it makes it a lot easier for the running back to gain yards. So with that being said, this leads me perfectly to my first argument on why I don't think Gurley should win the MVP. While he's averaging 5 yards per carry, there are other running backs who are providing more to their offense than him. I mentioned this earlier, but I hand-tracked each of his 198 carries so far in the year. I used my understanding of their scheme in order to quantify how much his offensive line is creating for him on a run-by-run basis. Now, if you're new to this channel, I've talked about this type of analysis before, but for those that aren't, the basic idea is that if a running back has a huge open hole, he shouldn't get credit for those yards. Likewise, if a running back slips 3 tackles in the backfield, then somehow bursts his way outside, he should get more credit for that gain. Using that simple principle, I analyzed every single play he ran in order to create the following chart. As you can see, on Gurley's most ran play outside zone, the offense is averaging 5.5 yards per carry. Their gap plays are averaging roughly 4.7 yards, while their inside zone run is averaging a meager 2.3 yards. With the success of their outside zone running game, it's of no surprise that this run is their most ran play. They ran it on 61% of Gurley's carries. Further, I used my analysis to separate the offensive line contribution on these runs as well. On the screen, you can see the comparison between the blue bars and the orange bars just to see how ridiculous their blocking and in general their scheme design is on these plays. Based on my tracking, Gurley's average run is getting over 3 yards per carry just by what his offensive line creates. Simply put, if Gurley follows his blocks and does nothing more, he still gets 3 yards. Now, he's definitely adding more to that metric than just what his offensive line is creating, but it's pretty crazy just how successful this offensive line is. In order to illustrate that further, I wanted to see how his offensive line compared to some of the other running backs across the league. For this video, I went through and tracked over 500 more carries in addition to what I did for Gurley. Based on what I saw on film, the Rams' offensive line is dominating his peers. Compare his average run to somebody like Saquon Barkley. We all know the Giants have a terrible offensive line, and most can reasonably guess by now that Barkley is adding much more for his offense. Whether you like him or not after getting picked second overall, he's killing Gurley in all these metrics. He's breaking more tackles consistently, and he's creating bigger plays for his offense independent of what his line is creating. Now, while a yard more per carry for an offensive line may not seem like a ton, but imagine just how that adds up over the course of a season. If both these running backs get 300 carries, then Gurley automatically gets 300 more rushing yards. That is the power of having such a superior offensive line and play caller. It just makes things easy. To further illustrate this point, and because I spent way too many hours tracking each play, seriously, I must have spent 20 hours just watching each of these snaps, I wanted to compare Gurley to his backup, Malcolm Brown. Statistically, Brown is actually averaging the same number of yards per carry in this offense. Now, as you know by now and after watching my videos, yards per carry as a metric is literally one of my least favorite stats. So to see how well he was doing objectively, I went through and tracked all of his carries as well. As you can see, he is definitely not as good as Gurley. This is obvious as he's been put in better situations on his limited snaps. However, the main takeaway I want you to get from this analysis is that when you are a running back and you go untouched for 3 yards per play, it definitely makes things easier. Both Brown and Gurley are fortunate to be in the system, and they are benefiting like crazy based on what I saw on film. Moving on from this argument, the second point I'm going to make on why Gurley shouldn't win the MVP is how he compares to the last running back that won this award. That player was Adrian Peterson. In 2012, Peterson won the MVP after rushing for over 2,000 yards. During that season, he was 8 yards shy of breaking the single season record for rushing that was set by Eric Dickerson. He also beat out Peyton freaking Manning and J.J. Watt in voting, even after Watt collected over 20 sacks in a single year. For this analysis, I actually went back and watched some tape on Peterson during that year, and oh my god, I completely forgot just how ridiculous he was for that offense. He's clearly a more talented pure runner than Gurley, while on the other hand, Gurley is much more versatile in his skill set. In today's passing game, this is obviously important. After calculating their average offensive yards per game, what I found was kind of surprising. They are both averaging roughly 140 yards per game for each of their respective teams. I also looked at 2 other metrics just to give you a full picture of what each of these players bring to their offenses. I looked at touchdowns per game, and I also showed percent of total yards. As you can see, Gurley has the clear edge in touchdowns per game. He's averaging almost a full TD more than Peterson did back in 2012. While touchdowns are obviously important, percent of total offensive yards is another key metric as well. This metric gives you a taste for just how involved that player is for this offense. And as you can see, they are clearly different in this stat. Peterson is dominating Gurley by 13 whole percentage points. Now, if you look back at Peterson's 2012 season with the Vikings, he was the definition of a workhorse back for that team. He literally dragged his quarterback, Christian Ponder, down the field and gave the Vikings a chance in each and every game. Meanwhile, people are talking about Gurley in that same regard, but at a full 13% less in offensive yardage, that doesn't exactly hold up. What's kind of interesting though, is that there's actually another running back this season who's contributing more total offensive yardage for his team. That player is Ezekiel Elliott. He has 1,100 total yards in the season, and he's giving the Cowboys 35% of their production. Now, in my opinion, if you're going to make the argument that Gurley is the engine for this team, you better support that with a variety of metrics. You'd also think that if people are making this claim, then Gurley would have to be on a crappy offense similar to what Peterson was back in 2012. I'm going to ask you this rhetorical question just to prove a point. Would you rather have Christian Ponder as your quarterback, or would you rather have Sean McVay calling plays for Jared Goff? I know my answer, and I think most would agree it's a pretty easy choice to make. In this offense, McVay is putting his players in a clear position to succeed. There's a reason why this offense consistently puts up 35 points. He knows how to disguise simple play designs, and they have so much talent across their team that they easily move the ball down the field. What's kind of interesting is that Jared Goff is also being considered as an MVP candidate as well. He's having a fantastic year so far, and while we're not going to dig into this claim in this video, the point I'm making is simple. Peterson had to overcome a 21st ranked defense according to Football Outsiders, and he did that by going above and beyond the support he received on the field. As of right now, I just can't say the same for Gurley. Yes, he's having a good year in almost every metric, but when your offense puts you in such a perfect position to make plays, it's very hard for me to give you my vote. To say that he's killing his own position group, let alone outproducing multiple other quarterbacks, I think that's flat out wrong. This last point leads me to my final argument in this video. I think there are at least two other guys that I would easily pick before Gurley. Now, both these players are quarterbacks, surprise, surprise, but they definitely deserve the credit they're getting. To me, those players are Patrick Mahomes and Drew Brees. They're each having a great year, and I would be shocked if neither one of these two won it. Personally, my vote is for Drew Brees. In this season, he already broke Brett Favre's career completion record back in Week 3, and in Week 5, he also broke Peyton Manning's all-time passing yardage as well. I honestly don't understand how he hasn't won this award yet. It's almost like watching the Oscars and literally waiting years and years for Leonardo DiCaprio to finally win the Best Actor. Damn it, it's Drew Brees' turn, and just like Leo did last year, I think he's finally going to win it this year. Overall, and going back to Todd Gurley, it's not that he's a bad running back or anything like that. I actually think he's a really good player. But MVP doesn't go to a really good player. It goes to the best of the best, and the person who is leading his team to more wins than they would without him. To me, that instantly disqualifies Gurley. I think he's a great piece for the system, but again, the offensive line that he runs behind and the scheme that Sean McVay created are the real winners for the Los Angeles Rams. Well, that's all I have for you. Just letting y'all know I won't be making a video over the Thanksgiving break. I'm going to be traveling to visit my family, so I won't have time to record and edit a video. I should have my betting advice videos out for you at normal times, but if that's not out for whatever reason, make sure you check out my Twitter account at SamuelRGold. With that being said, MyBookie is my official sponsor this year. If you want a 100% sign-up bonus for up to $1,000, you can use the promo code SAMUEL100. Go ahead and sign up to bet with me, bet against me, or bet on one of the many other sporting games they offer. Thank you so much for all of your support and for watching my videos. If you want to keep this channel going, you can support me on my Patreon account, or you can follow me on Twitter at SamuelRGold.